This is Randy May. I'm glad you came to my channel today. We're going to be talking about relationships today, so we'll just jump right into it and we'll go from there. Relationships, there's nothing in life more important than your relationship with God, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your children, your relationship with your friends that you interact with. The greatest losses in life is broken relationships with people. Nobody wants a broken relationship, but they do happen from time to time in life, and we have to learn to deal with them. You can't be a whole person in life if your relationships are not fixed between you and your family and your friends. Disarray and despair in your relationships will cause real problems with you and your family and your friends. So God knows more about relationships than anyone. We preach about salvation in church. We preach about healing in church. We teach people about praise and worship in church. We teach them about spiritual warfare. But we need to teach people about relationships also. It's very important to the Word of God and in our daily lives. We need God's wisdom every day to walk in our life and to have relationships with people. We think when we get married and we have children that we already know everything. But let me tell you something, you don't know anything about relationships. Just because you get married doesn't make you a good husband. We get saved and we love Jesus, but that doesn't make us a good parent. That doesn't make us a good spouse. Just because we get married doesn't mean you're an expert. You could have 10 children. Doesn't mean you're a good father. Doesn't mean you're a good mother. Why? Because you have to learn to be a good parent. You have to learn to be a good spouse. You have to learn to be a good father. It doesn't come right away. It doesn't come on its own. You have to learn it. Let's talk about the Lord here. We'll look at Titus chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. It says, "But as for you, speak things which are fitting for sound doctrine. Older men are to be temperate, dignified, sensible, sound in faith, in love, and in perseverance." Well, how do we do this? We learn it. You don't become these things without learning it. It takes a while to learn it. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good. Who are they teaching? The younger women. A lot of churches have got away from this over the years, especially in the day and age we live in. They don't seek after the elders to learn from them. But native tribes here in the United States, native tribes, they learned from their elders. They looked up to the elders. They learned what they should do in life from the elders. And we should do this in the church. These people that have lived a long time, served God for many years, they've got a wealth of information that they can pass on to you, and you get wisdom from them. So that we must encourage the young women to love their husbands and to love their children. They have to be taught how to be a good wife, how to be a good mother. It has to be learned. You learn it from your parents. All right? You learn how to be. Now, if you had bad parents and they weren't good at anything, or they wasn't serving God, then you need to seek out from elders in the church and from the Word of God and learn how to be a good parent. Learn how to be a good spouse. Just because you stand before a preacher and take wedding vows and exchange rings doesn't mean you're going to be a good husband. You have to learn how to be a good husband, so that we may encourage the younger women to love their husbands and their own children, to be sensible, pure workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the Word of God will not be dishonored. All right? This doesn't mean that every man in the church has authority over your wife. You have authority over your wife, but other men don't. All right? So you need to step up and take that role. I won't allow anybody to disrespect my wife. I won't allow anybody to talk mean to my wife. or to my children. I always tell people, you got a problem with somebody in my family, you come to me. I'm the head of the family. All right? I'm in charge of the family. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Sorry, I had to throw that in. But I'm the head of the May family. So if you got a problem with my wife or my children, you take it up with me. All right? You don't disrespect my family or disrespect me. How do we learn that? I learned it from my father and my mother. I learned it from older people in our church. That if you've got a problem with someone's family and they're causing trouble, you go to them. You talk to the father. And then you talk to the mother together and say, wait, we got a problem here. We learn to be sensible people from the Word of God. To be sensible, pure workers at home, kind, being subject to their own husbands, so that the Word of God will not be dishonored. Likewise, urge the young men to be sensible. How does the young men learn to be sensible? From the older men. Hey, you can't get mad at a drop of a hat. You shouldn't let that affect you like that. You need to step back and take a deep breath. You might want to think things over. You learn these things from the men of God and from reading the Word of God. You don't learn this on your own, just stumbling around. You look at people for examples. Likewise, in all things show yourself to be an example of good deeds. What does it say? Good deeds, not bad deeds. You learn to be sensible. With purity and doctrine, disenfiled. So, sound in speech, which is beyond reproach. We should speak good things. We should use good language to people, not cuss every other word. The world does that. They can't go 2 sentences without saying a dirty word. For years and years when I was growing up, they made movies, and you hardly ever heard anything, a bad word in it. Now they can't say 2 sentences without saying filthy words. When I hear that, I turn the channel. I'm not going to sit there and listen to their filthy mouth because they can't speak 2 sentences without saying something dirty. What I hate is when people use MF or when they use GD, use the Lord's name in vain. I'm done. I'll walk away. If I'm out in public and somebody starts talking that way, if I'm sitting there eating and I got my wife and kids there, my grandchildren, I'll say to them, hey, why don't you clean your mouth up a little bit? You got kids here. There's ladies here. Many people don't respect women no more. Why? Because they've been taught to speak out and say whatever you want, open your mouth. I tell you what, my mother used to say it's better to let people think you're an idiot than open your mouth and remove all doubt. All right? So when people talk that way around them, I put a stop to it. I say, hey, you can't talk that way around my grandkids and my wife. You need to clean it up. Well, it's just the way I talk. Well, just because you're uneducated, just because you're an idiot, just because you like to say a cuss word every other word, that makes you look like what you are, an idiot. People ought to be able to carry on a conversation without talking filthy. I had a grandfather, my mother's father, and he was real bad about doing that. And I'd have to tell him, Grandpa, don't talk that way in front of me. And he called me a choice name once in a while. It's just the way he was. But I said, Grandpa, I got to go. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I'll stop it. I said, Grandpa, you need to clean it up. I'm not going to sit here. I come 200 miles to visit you, and you're not going to talk to me that way. All right? And so you just have to take a stand. I did it in respect, but I called his hand on it. Sound in speech, which is beyond reproach. If you're on reproach, it says, see that the opponent will be put to shame, a court having nothing bad to say about us. Why? Because if you keep a good reputation and you talk right and you act right, if they bring up an accusation or say you said this or that, people say, no, I know him better than that. I don't believe that. Why? Because you're of good sound mind. You're of good sound character. You learn this from the older people, the elders, and they teach you what you should do and how you should act. And men need to realize they've got away from it. You need to be kind and be a clean mouth all the time if you're a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you still should treat women with respect. That means you don't cuss in front of women. You don't belittle women. You don't talk down to them. You don't say dirty things to children. You need to clean your speech up. And we learned this from our elders. My father taught me, never talk bad in front of a woman. Open the door for her. Always speak yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. You don't know how many times in life I never got to serve in the military. All right, I had asthma real bad. I took 2 allergy shots a week for 17 years. I had all sorts of breathing issues. But I registered for the draft. They called me down. They were going to give me a physical. They said bring a letter from a doctor if you're under current treatment. If you're under medication, bring the medicine with you. And I did. So they told me, we're not going to give you a physical. We'll send you a new draft card. Go on home. We'll send you something. And they did. They sent me I was still in school. They sent me a thing. I don't remember if it's 1H or something like that. It meant I was still a student, still in school. And then they were in the Vietnam War right around the time, and they were bringing troops home, bringing them home, so they wasn't sending them over. But I learned from my father, don't go around talking filthy and acting filthy and speaking bad things in front of women. And people need to realize that, and they need to be taught that. We can't be swayed by false teachers in the church that bring devastation to our lives by their false teaching. You're supposed to be wiser. Wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. Relationships rely upon what we learn, all right, what we're taught. All right, if your father slapped your mother, you don't slap women. If your father called your mother filthy names, you don't call your wife filthy names. We learned this from the church and the elders in the church. So if you had a bad childhood, I'm sorry you did, but you need to break that cycle of talking bad and speaking things that are horrible and cussing. You need to learn to talk and be intelligent without having to use dirty words. Unfortunately, we hear it from our politicians, from the top all the way down. I've heard the president say some dirty words on TV, and that really makes you look uneducated. It makes you look that you're not a good person, that you can't live above that. You can't speak without saying things and calling people dirty names. I'm not picking him out and riding him. I said there's a bunch of them that do it, but just lately I heard him call a reporter three bad names. I guess he thought his mic was off, and everybody heard him. And then, of course, later on that day, his press secretary called the reporter and said the president's sorry and this and that and all that. And I understand that. Well, I thank God that he realized he did something wrong and that he tried to correct it. But we even hear it from leaders. And this is terrible. People need to clean it up and act right. You learn this. You have to learn to be a good husband. You have to learn to be a good wife. You have to learn to be a good person. You have to learn to be a good father and a good mother. Just because you can reappropriate and have 10 kids don't mean you're going to be a good father. You have to learn to be it. I learned from my father and my mother. Fortunately, they were godly people. My dad was a very wise person. My mother was really smart. And I learned from them on how I should treat my children and my family and my spouse. And I watched people in the church, how the men treated their wives and how the wives treated their husbands. And so this is how we learn. It's passed down. Paul gave Titus counsel on how to help in all ages in the church. All ages need to be taught. Young children, preteens, teens, young adults, all the way up. Everybody needs to be taught. The older should teach the younger. How do we do that? How do we have good relationships with people? We work at it. It takes work. How do you do when you speak to people? By how we speak to people is how we're going to act in front of people, by what we speak. Our words do have effect on people, either positive or negative. Examples come out of the Bible on how to treat people. God-given values. We learn these God-given values from the older people, the elders at the church, the pastor, the teachers. We learn these things in church. Why? We pass it on from generation to generation. We should have teaching that helps all ages at church, not just certain people. God's grace is not a license for us to go out and sin. God's grace is not a license for us just to say anything we want. I've heard people say it in church over the years. I just plain spoken. I say whatever I want to say. All right? You know what that equates into my mind? You're an idiot. This person's an idiot. They're going to say stupid stuff. They're going to offend people. And they don't care about people's feelings. And so they're not going to be a good person. That's what I hear you saying when you say I say anything what I want to say. And if I'm getting aggravated at somebody, I'm just going to tell them what I think and all that. A mind's a terrible thing to waste. You can only give a few pieces of your mind. After a while, you gave most of it away. All right, like my mother said, it's better to let people think you're an idiot than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. And so if you want to have successful relationships with people, then you need to learn how to speak to people and how to do things. Let's learn something else from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 27. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea. Let them rule over the birds of the sky, over the cattle and over the earth, over every creeping thing on the earth that creeps on the earth. It says God created man in his own image. And the image of God he created him, male and female, he created them. God created Adam and Eve, not Julius and Steve, all right? God created man and woman woman was made to be a helpmate to Adam and to help support him spiritually. And without women, our society would be horribly in bad shape. Women sometimes bring the sensibility to a man. And my wife many times has said, no, I know, she knows how to read me. She'd see my face and she'd say, don't say nothing. All right, let me do the talking. Be still, don't say nothing. Because she knows I was hacked off and mad because they were doing something and I didn't like it. And she says, Nat, you aren't in the mood. Just take it easy. Because you don't want to speak to people when you're mad. Because when you're mad, you'll say things that you shouldn't say. So my wife is kind of a calming force to me a lot. I really need her. If you're single, you're going to have problems in life. If you're married, you're going to face problems in life. Why? Because we have relationships and we have to work at having these relationships and we have to learn how to be good to people. And we learn this from the Word of God. It tells us right here not to be over drunk, be drunken with wine, to treat people mean. We learn from the Word of God and we learn from the elders in the church and the people that have been Christians for years. Why? Problems come with life. We can't avoid problems. We can't avoid bad relationships and broken relationships. It's going to happen in life. Problems come with life, and it's the way it is. Exceptions without reality brings disappointments. If you expect people to be perfect and do everything right, you're going to be sadly mistaken, because not everybody lives right, not everybody does right, and some people have horrible relationships with people. The grass is not always greener on the other side. Solomon realized this, and he realized he couldn't solve his problems in life by switching partners all the time. He had multiple wives and concubines. It didn't solve his problems. How you solve problems is sit down and pray and ask God to help you. Then seek counsel from people that are older, that pastors should be able to help you out. Relationships have to come from love. You learn about love, all right? It was a guy on TV who said, I may not be very smart, but I know what love is, all right? There's a lot of people who don't know what love is. Forrest Gump's got more sense than them. You need to learn how to love people, how to love your spouse, your children, your friends, and everything else. You may not know a whole lot about anything, but you need to know what love's all about. And so we need God to be present in our life. Why? God is so big in our life and should control our life and give us hope and give us a future and give us what we need. We need God in our life to be a better person. If we have faith for healing, if we have faith for salvation, if we have faith for finances in our life, if we have faith, we should have some for relationships. How to deal with other folks. How do you do that? By learning it. It don't come natural. You have to learn it. Relationships means an investment of our time. It means that we invest time into our relationships. You invest time in your hobbies, don't you? I love to go shooting. I love to go out and shoot targets and shoot. It relaxes me. I blow steam off. I love it. But I need to invest as much time or more in my relationships with my family and other people than I do my hobby. I don't know what your hobby is. I've got a nephew and his son, my great nephew, from up in Illinois, Brighton, Illinois, up in that area there. They love to go drag racing. My nephew's in his late 70s. He's still drag racing. Why? Because that's his hobby. He loves it. If you've got a hobby and you love it, you're going to do something with your hobby. I love going to car shows. I got a classic truck. I got an 84 Dodge Rampage. And I love taking it to car shows because it's a small truck and many people's never seen one. They say, did you have that thing custom built? Was that a car and you put a truck bed on it? Oh, no. And I'll tell them about the Rampage. Why? Because it's my hobby. I was in the car business for 25 years. I love cars. I love going to car shows. I love seeing classic vehicles, especially Mopars. All right, I love them. I'm a Mopar man. I've been for 40 years. We should invest in our relationships with God, with our spouse, our children, our friends. Learn to be the best person that you can possibly be. Learn to be the best friend that you can possibly be and be good at it. Relationships are all about love. If you love people enough, if you love your family enough, you will work on relationships. It's all about love. All right? Forrest says that love, I may not be very smart, but I know what love is. Do you know what love is? Do you know how to love people properly? If you don't, pray, ask God, seek help from elders, and learn how to have good relationship with people and love them. Learn something else too. On the bottom right-hand corner of that screen is a button for subscribe. If you will subscribe to that, I would really appreciate it. If you punch that subscribe button, that will help get this pushed out to other people and get more and more views and be able to reach people. But I need people to subscribe. Click like, and if you will make a comment, I promise I'll get back to you just as quick as I possibly can and respond to your comment. Thank you for your time. This time, till next time, Randy says bye.